I'll let you go first.
Oh, thanks. Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name's Debbie Lucas. I'm an English instructor here to help facilitate our discussion. Is Hannah Padilla, our success coach for CCP students, and also Lydia Torres, our also success coach for, there she is. Really appreciate you joining us. The focus of our meeting is kind of to discuss the partnerships that we have with Onslow County Schools and the best practices from both the student services perspective as well as an instructor perspective. One of the things, just to kind of recognize the importance of the partnership that we have in this endeavor in teaching CCP students, especially on the high school campuses. I'd like to thank Ms. Cassidy, the principal of White Oak High School, for joining us today. It is vital for us as we expand this endeavor to really and truly partner with our peers in Onslow County Schools and to build collaborative relationships. So Ms. Cassidy, I really appreciate you taking time out of your first day of the semester as well to join us. So
thank you. Glad to be here.
Yes, ma'am, I appreciate it. What we'll talk about first is from a student services perspective, what some of the best practices for engaging students, retaining, registering, all of those kinds of administrative functions that we have. So I'm going to turn this over to Hannah Padilla and Lydia here just in a second. If at any time over the course of our discussion you have a question or a suggestion, please jump in either in chat. Lydia will be moderating the chat for us, or just unmute or raise your hand. Okay, so Hannah.
Hi, guys. So I'm going to tell you probably a lot of things that you have already heard like a million times, but especially this last semester when we had so many classes being taught in Onslow County buildings, some things that we found that were really helpful. So you've heard this a million times, but the earlier that we jump on these students, the better. So if you're noticing attendance struggles, if they're not turning in assignments early on, if there are weird behavior things happening, obviously you can handle behaviors in your classroom because you are the teachers. However, if there are things you have questions about or situations you may not have encountered before because you have a group of high school students now instead of a group of adults, feel free to reach out because that's why I'm here. So early, you can do an eTrieve referral if that is your preferred method of contact. I also respond well to emails. I think we're supposed to be doing eTrieve because of like tracking data and things like that. So if you do an eTrieve referral, I would really appreciate it, but you can always follow that up with an email or a phone call if you want to share extra details with me. You know, other important things for these high school students are the grade check-ins and the final grade forms. The grade check-ins are just a really quick-ish and relatively easy way for us to get a snapshot of how students are doing. And then instead of, if you have, you know, 6 or 7 students that need contact from me, a grade check-in form is a really easy way to do that. And you don't have to do 6 or 7 eTrieve forms. You can just do the grade check-in and I'll know, oh, look, that student has, you know, a D. I probably should give them a little extra support. And there's a note section there, and you're welcome to fill that note section up. And you can also follow those up with an email. We also have some additional support this semester specifically for classes that are being taught in Onslow County buildings. And that's Lydia Torres. Some of you have met her already, but she's actually going to be in the buildings right now, kind of on a bi-weekly schedule. So she'll be there to sort of do all of these things. And I'll let her go for a little bit.
Really quickly, just to introduce myself, I'm Lydia Torres. I am new to the area in August. I came from originally from Austin, Texas. I've lived in California for 2 years and then found myself here. For my position here is really to support the students who are taking the classes on the high school campuses. I envision that I will help them a lot with sort of how to transition from high school courses to college courses, whether that be organization, creating a schedule, and things of that nature. My main goal is just to help the students with sort of advocating for themselves in your classes that they are going to be taking. So that's just a little about me. I'll work really closely with Hannah as well, but I'm going to focus mostly on the students who are on the high school campuses.
So Lydia has access to those eTrieve forms as well, so she'll be seeing the grade check-ins and the referrals and things. If you are teaching a section that is on a high school campus, you can feel free to contact Lydia directly, in addition to the forms if you want. And then if for all other situations, you can still contact me. She's just an added layer, so that those students who don't have access to campus for whatever reason will have access to support services right there with them. That's about all I have. So, Debbie, turning it over to Debbie now.
So
Hold on.
echoes. All right. So one of the things, just for some background, is last academic year, we did, or I taught exclusively online all of these sections. So this semester for me, as well as some of all of y'all who are in our session, this is the first time we've been face-to-face on a high school campus with students. So I've been kind of relying on some of my and some of the issues that they have, adjusting and adapting to college on their high school campus. That's probably one of the.
There's no video.
Got it.
Sorry, folks. We had a weird echo, and so we were trying to remediate that, and I think we fixed it now. Maybe, except for that you can't.
All
You're on.
right, can you guys hear me now? Sorry.
Can you hear Debbie?
Yeah. There's a weird delay too on the video.
So turn your mic off.
Yep.
And you have audio.
Okay. Yeah, we're there now. Sorry. It froze and then got weird. That's actually how I sound like a robot, just in case anyone was wondering. But as I was saying, one of the things I teach exclusively at this point on the high school campuses, and that is probably one of the things that comes up again and again in some of the research that I've read about how to manage high school students and college classes on high school campuses, is distinguishing the difference between a college classroom at the college campus and a college classroom on a high school campus. And there's a lot of negotiating things that come from that. Really, one of the best things that I've been able to do over the course of this past semester is really to build relationships with other faculty on campus. It is probably the most important thing that we can do, aside from recognizing, acknowledging, and honoring the fact that that we are guests on their campus. Like, we are there to do a job. We are there to help students be successful in a college class, but primarily we are guests. And if we keep that recognition and humility in mind, I found that goes a long way to getting help where and when you need it for things like technology. Yeah, absolutely. But I think if we, Nancy, set the tone from the beginning, you're right. And I've experienced nothing but hospitality by using this approach. I understand that everybody has a different approach and a different way of managing their responsibilities, their roles. But I think it's important to, especially when we're dealing with faculty and staff, just like we do here, right? To acknowledge that we're building bridges, we're building connections, and that we need to treat each other as professionals and with respect. Which is, and I'm not saying anybody doesn't do that. I'm just saying that is has been for me critical in my success when something happens on campus, like a computer goes down or the projector goes down or Wi-Fi goes down. There's any number of things that can happen on a high school campus that we wouldn't necessarily expect to happen here. I've been rambling for a few minutes, so let me just take a second to ask if you guys have any questions or anything that you've noticed kind of from a peer-to-peer level that has worked well for you. I know there's a few people on here who have also taught in the high schools, or maybe hasn't worked well, and we can kind of discuss that.
There's one question from Carlos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what is that?
So
Okay. So Carlos earlier mentioned that he teaches some higher level chemistry courses that require a lot of attention and discipline. And he reaches out to the students multiple times, and he always does a really excellent job of keeping me up to date with what's going on. But sometimes he feels like he hits a brick wall with those students. His take is that they are overwhelmed with the rigor of the course. What other advice can you provide? And so I'll answer it, but I feel like you guys also may have some good advice for him. But I, just thinking back to recent semesters where I know that we've encountered some problems with that class specifically, I think a lot of times, not that you're not doing this, but relationship building with students is really important, because I know that there were some life things going on for some of those students that sort of caused distractions for them. And while students in high school are different, especially when they're in a class that's fully high school students, their life situations are not that different from adult students that you encounter. High school students have money struggles, they have caretaking responsibilities, they have jobs, transportation issues, just like all of the things our adult students are encountering, our high school students are also encountering. And so sometimes I think that gets in the way of what's going on. And I agree, Carlos, that it might be a little bit of an outlier because organic chemistry is advanced, very advanced.
There's another question about onboarding, and if there's a process for those students who want to take college classes and how to do college.
We take the onboarding and tell Stephen that we'll get back to him.
Okay. So I'm going to answer Holly's question. Is there like an onboarding process for students who want to take college classes? And then Stephen will come back to your question in a little bit. So for the onboarding process, students are required to fill out an application every semester that they want to take dual enrollment courses, and that's a state requirement. And that's so that they can show that they are eligible for classes. And so eligibility looks like 2.8 unweighted GPA in high school. And then if they have taken 2 classes with us, they must maintain a 2.0 GPA to continue that eligibility. For the second half. So that's kind of the onboarding process. They fill out the application, they give us an updated copy of their transcript, they get signatures from the parent or guardian, they sign it, their high school counselor has to sign it, and then the principal or the principal's designee, which is sometimes the counselor again. That's just somebody at the school who has final authority to say, yes, this student can take classes. They also are required to list which classes they're interested in taking, so that their counselors have an opportunity to say, hey, I'm not really sure that you're ready for whatever class, so let's take that off the list and maybe add a different class. In terms of like how to college, we did just enact a required orientation that's given by the college navigators for all incoming CCP students. So their first semester with us, they will have to do that orientation. We're obviously sort of in a gap year as we catch up because students who have taken classes with us previously aren't required to do that. So within the next couple of years, we'll see that for all students. And yes, Kim, that is for both on-campus and high school classes. They are required to do that orientation. Students can also take ACA, which is an excellent introduction to how to college. So if you all have students that are not registered for ACA, please encourage them to take that because high school students are allowed to take ACA. The orientation, Holly asked when that would be implemented again. We actually started implementing that for students who are registering for spring semester. So all new CCP students starting classes tomorrow should have or will have the orientation. And then we'll get caught up and eventually all of the students will have had that orientation at some point. But like I said, students who took classes last semester or last year won't have that. They are allowed to go if they want to, but it's optional. Somebody suggested, no, is everybody reading the chat?
Yeah.
I know, yeah, okay, because Debbie said that Lydia could come to your class and greet CCP students, especially if you're in the on-campus classes, and she's actually planning to do that. And I am also willing to come. I know Carlos said at the beginning of the semester to pull your CCP students aside and kind of give them a pep talk. You can do that. I've also come to classes and instructors have dismissed all of the adult students a little bit early, and I've just chatted with CCP students towards the end of class for a few minutes just to remind them of what's going on.
So do you want to get Stephen's
Yeah,
question?
I got that going. So I've been jotting some notes, and Mr. Keys, I see your question too. I'll address that in kind of the order that I see them. So, Stephen, one of the things you brought up was student conduct, and what I noticed, it was also a problem in my classroom. There is a different. It's a little different when you're on a high school campus. Students are kind of required to be in class, and behaviors. I encountered some significant behavioral issues at one of the high schools I was at, which prompted me to revise my syllabus in a very direct way to address those policies. Like, I've not had to have a student conduct policy section of my syllabus before, but I have added that going into the spring semester. I also have kept my division chair very aware of what's going on, and also, if you recall, a few minutes ago, I talked about building relationships. As I was having this problem at one of the high schools, I reached out to the guidance counselor and administrators, and just said, look, here's what's going on. And so having a partnership and a relationship with the faculty and staff on the high school campuses allows you to deal with those kind of issues in a more collaborative way. I understand that you know, there's some Yeah, Nancy, I will send you my syllabus sections. I can send that to anybody, like the whole group. Um, the other thing, Stephen, I hope that answers your question. You know, we have a student conduct policy. This is what my division chair said. You know, we can follow that. If the student's behavior is disruptive to the point where it is disrupting classroom instruction, that becomes a referral to the division chair of student services. It's not something that we have to deal with or that we are expected to deal with. That's why we have student services professionals on staff. So I think collaborating with, sorry, I missed that, Stephen. Like dealing with high school teachers. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, hi. We actually had a faculty member over here that was stalked practically almost every day by the high school student or the high school teacher that he was using, whose room he was using. And it got so bad that he thought about quitting. And I just think that, so there was really no etiquette shared. He went to the principal, and the principal said, "Oh, I don't really think that's a problem, that she's, doing these things." So there was no, and maybe and maybe this isn't the conversation we're having here today, but I thought it might have been because Nancy had mentioned something about we're guests on their campuses and all of that. So, but in any case, that's what I was talking about.
We fixed it. Nope, we didn't. Okay. We're good.
Okay, you can speak. I'm aware that there, at different high schools, there were some concerns with the relationships between teachers and their classrooms. One thing to keep in mind is we have offices, and so when we're done teaching a class, we leave the classroom and go to our office to do our work. When we're on a high school campus, and there's a couple where I share a classroom with other teachers, they don't have an office, okay? And so while it's in Title IX does apply to high schools, but I think we need to understand and recognize that the classroom that we're in is their office space, and so finding ways to recognize that is important. And I understand it's a touchy situation, and teachers get upset and classrooms are messy, and there's a lot of things going on. But what we have to realize is many of the high schools in Onslow County are overcrowded, and they don't have a separate space to allocate to us. Like they don't have an empty classroom that they can say, this is yours. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And I just like any other relationship, professional relationship that we have, I think it's important to recognize where all the sides are coming from in that. We are in their space. Just like if you had somebody using your office and sitting at your desk, that's essentially how they're feeling.
And I think it's also important to note that a lot of times they may not know. I mean, eventually they will know, but early on, the teacher whose room that you're in, they may not know that they're going to be sharing their space until maybe the first day of school, and that varies school to school. Some schools they're like, hey, who wants to volunteer their classroom? And other times it's not. Yeah. Ashley, what's up?
Hey, I just thought I'd speak to that a little bit because we do we are aware of some of the growing pains that we discovered with this first semester, and we have scheduled meetings with all of the high school principals That is something that we want to address within those meetings, is making sure that there's better communication with anybody whose classroom space we're using. Obviously, that's something that just kind of, we kind of made some assumptions that that was being communicated, and it wasn't, and every high school is a different site. So we're trying to create more consistency and more expectations among all of these different sites, and create, like Debbie pointed out, these really good working relationships and mutual respectful relationships. That said, we will do everything we can with that, but there's no promise. Sometimes they've had to change the space at the last minute because of capacities or technology issues. So I'm just saying that as a caveat that could happen, but we are certainly going to do everything we can to be as proactive as we can be with making sure everybody's on the same page and that we have a nice shared environment. But we're still figuring some things out, and we had these intrepid instructors who were really our pilots this semester, and I think did an absolutely phenomenal job and did everything we've asked and more. But we are really working hard to iron out some of those kinks.
I can talk about the parents. Okay, so Keys, you asked how to deal with the parents of CCP students and when are you allowed to communicate with parents, etc. You, under no circumstances, have to communicate with parents if you don't want to. Some faculty are comfortable speaking with parents and some aren't, and that's totally fine. It's always a good idea to speak to your division chair whenever a parent becomes involved, and it's also helpful to sort of loop me in. I typically will take over speaking to parents if it needs to. And when are you allowed to communicate with parents? We have to make sure that there's a signed FERPA release on file before we speak with parents. And I can check that for you. So if you are in a situation where you want to talk to a parent, just check with me and I can let you know if there's a signed FERPA release. We include it on all of the CCP applications. It's on the last page, and students can choose to sign it if they would like to. But again, loop in your division chair. If it's a situation where there isn't a FERPA release on file, there are some other alternatives, but you should under no circumstances be talking to that parent if there's not a FERPA release. If there's not a FERPA release and there's a situation that really needs to be addressed, let me know and I can communicate directly with the school. That's kind of our loophole here, because the school has a vested educational interest in that student's performance and what's going on in your class. So does that answer your question? All right. First division chair and me before parents. Yes, please. So Brianna said she's taught an ACA course that had a large group of CCP students in there, and some of them were really focused on hard work, and the other sort of expressed that they didn't feel like they needed to be there. So in addition to chatting with them personally and sort of doing that relationship building and then doing faculty referrals, do you have any other advice? Debbie? Take out the ruler.
What did I miss there? There's a couple of things that I want to focus on for just a sec. One was academics, and the other the relationships that we're building with Onslow County Schools. For those of you who may have joined us a little bit after we started and I introduced everybody, I did ask a couple of the, I did invite representatives from each of the high schools to join us, and Ms. Cassidy, the principal at White Oak High School, did join us, and you know, kind of as we were discussing some of those relationships and things like that, I just wanted to offer her the opportunity to speak to that a little bit. and to maybe share ways that we could also recognize and understand and really work together. Because for this to work, we do have to work together. Ms. Cassidy?
I'm just going to hit on, can you hear me? I just want to, because this is a little different for me. Okay. I'm just going to hit on just a couple of things I heard you mention that I would like to reinforce and agree with, especially in perspective of space and timeliness and communication. I literally just came into White Oak right before school started. So this whole experience with Coastal starting here was all brand new to me. So I kind of had to learn it running. And I met with Miss Lucas and Miss Mabry, and forgive me for not remember the other folks that I met with. And I do think that's important. I had no idea what was going on. I kind of had to reach out to, I think, another high school because they'd had it the year before so that I could learn this process. But much of what you said, I think Miss Padilla is right on point, and Miss S, is that sometimes the timeline does not allow us to be as proactive, especially in my case. So when they talked about space, I was like, what do you mean space? I don't even know where the rooms are on this campus. So, how did I come up with that? So we did a walkthrough together. We had a space in mind. We realized it didn't work. Then we found another one, and literally it was right before school. Now, we were lucky in the sense that I had an open room, but some campuses do not. I think, as Ms. S said, that we're already overcrowded. So there is sharing of classrooms, and that teacher may not have gotten the information. Now, as an administrator, and you being guests, and I'm just one of those old time folks that you try and make your guests as comfortable as you can, and I think that Ms. Lucas specifically will confirm this, is that I try to share what I thought was relevant staff communication with them as much as possible. For example, whenever we had a situation with a child having to be quarantined and I knew they took that coach class, I tried to share with them, or any other situation like that. And I hope that they felt open enough to come and talk to me. Now, we're all different. Even you as coastal teachers are very different from your neighbor. And I cannot tell you that what I do is a common practice, but I do agree that there needs to be a rapport built with the administration, with your neighbor teacher, or if you're sharing classroom, that teacher, finding out what their do's and don'ts are when you're kind of in their space. Unlike college, our teacher space is their space, it's their home. They don't have a separate place. We have a lounge, but it's not the same thing. And if they feel like personal things are being used, again, have that conversation with them. Tell me what I can use, what I can't use. Tell me, am I allowed to move the desk in your classrooms? Tell me if I can't. Because at the high school level, we have certain expectations, especially now with COVID quarantine coming up, that is not shared with you because you're a totally different teaching platform and expectation. So I would agree with that rapport building. Maybe having a meeting with that teacher space. Once you find out who they are, maybe reaching out to them, introducing yourself that they know, and then finding out whether or not that space is going to be compatible for the both of you in that situation. It very well could be that it got thrown on that teacher at the last moment and they had no say so. The other piece I want to mention, again, I was trying to, after I was able to find the chat, and I was only catching little pieces, is the question about communicating with parents. Now, again, this is my thought. To me, when they take a college level class, whether it is on Coastal's campus or the high school campus, to me, they're stepping up. That expectation is that they're going to be a college student. Now, with college freshmen, you do have that transition piece, as we do with 8th grade to 9th grade, 6th grade, or 5th grade to 6th grade. There is that transition piece, and they've got to learn that perspective. But if your guidelines are your guidelines in terms of communication, the rights or release of information, I say you stick with that, because it's a right. Well, it's not a right. It is a privilege, and we should be exposing everyone to these opportunities. But it's still expectation that they are college students, whether they're on 1001 Piney Green Road or they're on Western Boulevard on the coastal campus. They are a college student. Now, the difference might be, because if they're on my campus and their peers are all their high school students that they've had since they were 9th grade, they're probably going to act more like high school students, and they may be more issues. But again, I simply say you reinforce what your expectation is in that class. And if it's such a situation that they are not being disruptive, Granted, at Coastal, I don't know if you are able to throw them out of a class or not, but I would say communicate with the administration about what problems you're having, and we can communicate then with the expectation that Coastal classes are a different environment, and they've got to bring themselves up to that environment. Now, if it doesn't work, then we can apply our own disciplinary actions, but we've got to know that piece up front. So again, that goes back to that rapport building and communication piece. And I think there was one more question that had popped up that I didn't see, that I saw right at the end.
About
Oh,
cell
about
phone.
cell phone policy. That cell phone policy is going to be different from campus to campus. I'm going to tell you that, but I tell my teachers, the cell phone policy that was here was one that was here before I got here, so I've kept it. I don't agree with it, but I've kept it because it takes time to transition. But I've told all my teachers that once they walk into your classroom, it is your cell phone policy. So if your policy is that they don't have their phone out, then you be consistent with it. Now, if they want to act like a high school student, then that goes back to you communicating to the administration, and we try to help you out with that support piece. But just because the cell phone policy may be they can use their phone in transition, once they walk in that classroom, that's your classroom. So at Coastal, what would you do? That would be my question. If you were at Coastal, what would you do? If you're a Coastal teacher and you're in a high school environment, what would you do? That would be my suggestion. I hope I just didn't ramble.
Ms. Cassidy, thanks so much for your perspective. I really appreciate that. And I do look forward to working with you again next semester. So the students were great. Nancy, the Onslow County Schools does not have a face covering requirement at this time. Face coverings are optional. There's a board meeting tonight, but I don't believe that they're going to change their policy. So what I wear a mask. I inform students that that Coastal's policy is to wear masks, but we cannot require them to wear a mask or face covering on Onslow County Schools facilities. I think that's actually correct. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's an optional policy for masks. So what I've noticed is that as we all kind of know, students don't do optional. So there's not a lot of mask wearing that I've noticed when it's optional. Right, yeah, I did add quite a bit of very specific policies in my syllabus, and I'd be happy to share those, as I mentioned to Nancy. Carlos, I'm glad I saw your name pop back up. We have just a few more minutes, but I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of academic expectations. Some of that we rely on student services and high school counselors for finding the students and enrolling them and ensuring that they meet the minimum requirements. I think most students can do the work, and I understand chemistry is hard. So more advanced classes might be harder, but students will rise to the occasion. Some of the things that I've noticed, these are high school students, and so when we look at them, they don't necessarily have the complete academic background that a traditional college student would have. And so we need to keep that in mind a little bit. That doesn't mean to reduce the level of rigor in our classes or anything like that, but keep in mind that these are children, and part of our role is to keep in mind that we want to do what we can as instructors to help them realize that they can college. And I use college as a verb there on purpose, because our focus of who we want to be in these classes are students who are socioeconomically, demographically, perhaps different than our more traditional college students. And maybe they're not as mature because some of these kids are 16 years old. I mean, I wasn't very mature at 16 years old, but they're colleging, right? And they're trying. And I think, given the opportunity, what I found is that these students can and do succeed. Does that mean that sometimes we need, I've had more requests for like, can I see a sample of that? More remediation and kind of like more practice are some things that they need. So I think keeping in mind that there needs to be a balance of academic rigor and maintaining the expectations of a college classroom, which you can do, and also realizing that these students are coming in to us early. And they are the students that we most want to provide that pathway as opposed to a barrier to college access and college success. I think that's probably the true, and I could be wrong here, but that is what we want to do. So Carlos, study sessions, extra practice, remediation. I had to do a lot of remediation kind of assignments, especially this semester. And another thing, and sometimes I veer onto, well, that's just an excuse, but we got to realize that high school juniors today, students who are high school juniors today, have not had a normal year of high school, period, full stop. And so I know there's a lot of excuse for that, for behavioral issues and things like that, but there's academic gaps, and we are just now starting to see research emerging on that. Something on the order of 5 months of reading comprehension and math skills, which I know is related to chemistry. So these students are coming in with fundamental gaps due to the massive amount of disruption that is caused in Onslow County specifically. And then you add to that 60% of our student population in Onslow County schools is military dependents who have moved here from other schools. That's another big foundational skills gap that is available in the literature too. So we're encountering students who need all of the help that we can offer. And Carlos, you're doing all the things, right? Extra credit, extra tutoring, those things are vital, and students will definitely take advantage of those. I meet with my students individually when I see their grades dropping, and I'm like, here's where we're at, and here's a plan for you to get ahead. But I think we are coming up against our time. Yeah. I will send out some of those best practices and some of the syllabus statements I wrote. To anyone interested, just shoot me an email. But I really appreciate your insight, your willingness to participate, your willingness to be honest and open. And Ashley, I appreciate you being here as my boss and all the support you gave me. And Miss Cassidy, I really appreciate your time today and look forward to working with you in the spring semester. Thanks all, ladies.
Yeah, thanks. If you guys have any other extra questions, let us know, and we'll get back to you.